And welcome to a new edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns, STLSportsPage.com here for our weekly get together about what's going on with the Cardinals. And I think, Mike, if you look at what's happened with the Cardinals this week, you're probably a little disappointed they only get a split of the 4-game series against the Pirates.
I think, and you look at this month as a whole, you're very disappointed. You drop 2 out of 3 to a team in Colorado that's historically bad, and then you have split with the Pirates, and you're not beating the teams that you need to beat.
Fortunately, the Cardinals have a little bit of an offensive problem against the Pirates. I think a long stretch there between Burleson's walk-off home run on Monday night and the time he got the 2 big hits from Sajacy and Walker on Thursday, the Cardinals really hadn't struggled to put anything together offensively.
And as we've talked about a lot on this podcast, with the lack of starting pitching, giving up so many runs, and when you can't score, it's not a good combination.
So, about 27 games left in the regular season, if my math is correct. So we'll see what happens between now and the end of the year. Cardinals in Cincinnati for the first of 3 games on Friday night. Big series for the Cardinals. But before we look ahead to that, I want to kind of get your thoughts on one question. Somebody asked me yesterday if I could pick how many Pirate pitchers I would pick. Say that 3 times. Pirate pitchers would you pick that before I would take anybody on the Cardinals?
Well,
based on what we saw. Not only this week, but just we know some other guys that didn't pitch the series.
The first stat that I just looked at right away was just starting pitching. So players that have pitched for the Pirates and players that have pitched for the Cardinals.
Correct.
The majority that are starting games. The Cardinals have 3 over a 5 ERA, and the Pirates have 1. So that tells me right there that I would take 4 of their starters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I went with 5 when I answered the question.
And 5. I didn't go through the bullpen very much, but there are a few there that I would take too.
You take Paul Skeens. You take Bubba Chandler, you take Mitch Keller, you take Jared Jones, who's out right now with an injury, and you take the guy who pitched on Thursday, Graham Ashcraft.
And honestly, Bailey Falter's been very good for them too.
True.
If you're comparing the options, I would much rather start Bailey Falter over Andre Palante.
Well, and you also, Johan Oviedo, the former Cardinal, pitched the other day. I mean, he was only worked 4 innings because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, but he looked very good. So.
He looks very good.
The Pirates are not going to be a bad team going forward. I mean, they played almost 500 baseball since they got off to such a bad start in May, but they played better. And their offense is just about, and maybe even worse than their Cardinals offense.
And why does it seem like the Pirates can take pitchers that, like Bailey Falter, who pitched in Colorado and may not have been great, but then came back here and all of a sudden figured it out? Like, why did the Pirates seem to be able to develop pitching? And when we get our pitchers to the big leagues, we don't seem to help them.
Yeah, it's a question. It's a good question, and I don't know the answer, but it is one that obviously Hein Bloom and the new people in charge of the organization, once they take over officially here at the end of the season, are going to have to answer, because I think that's where the improvement is going to have to come from. I mean, obviously you need improvement offensively too, but at least they have some guys in the pipeline offensively, young players that maybe haven't succeeded yet at the big league level, but you think still have a chance to succeed at the big league level, or the young guys coming up from the minor leagues. But yet, we don't know where the pitching help is going to come from.
And I don't know, I don't know if the answer is in Dusty Blake. Is it something that happens when they get to the majors, or is it in the development of the minor league system? It seems like we've got guys down there that can pitch well in that system. They come up here and then they start to struggle a little bit, and we're not able to correct those errors.
And it just seems like they also don't bring up very many young starting pitchers. It seems like almost everybody that's come up, especially everybody that's come up this year, has been a bullpen.
And it took really entirely too long to bring up Michael McGreevy and leave him here.
Right.
And
he's the only one, yeah.
If we're going to continue to run Andre Palante out there, then we're truly showing that we just don't care. So if that's the plan, I'd rather not bring these young guys up, because I don't want to screw them up this year or just have them get shell-shocked and give up 6 runs every game.
Well, and of course, now you're going into Cincinnati, as Chip Carey likes to call it, the Great American Small Park, because it is home run haven for pitchers. Oh, but at least Miles Michaelis is not pitching in this series.
It is, but ask someone like Adam Wainwright. He hated pitching there.
He did.
And he was, by all means, we would look at him and say that he was a great Cardinal pitcher, but he hated pitching there and had a huge ERA there.
And if you look at this series, and if you really want to be realistic about it, Cincinnati's one of the teams that the Cardinals are chasing, along with the Mets, and they're right now, even with Arizona and San Francisco, basically, for that third wild card spot. Cardinals really have to sweep the Reds this weekend, or I think that race is open as far as the Cardinals are concerned.
As we had said before, there were 2 teams that we were looking at from a wild card perspective, and when you split and aren't able to gain any ground, next thing you know, you're looking at 4 teams now, and really you're looking at 4 teams that you have to worry about, and it's going to be a difficult uphill road to climb. And you need to go on, a 6 or 7 game winning streak to really even make a difference.
Matthew Libator scheduled to get the start on Friday night in the opener in Cincinnati, Michael McGreevy on Saturday, and then the aforementioned Andre Palante on Sunday.
I don't understand why we can keep throwing him out there.
Who would you start in place? I mean, other than if you're going to call up Quinn Matthews, maybe who else would you put in place of Palante?
There's a couple options in my opinion, but I think number one is you try Kyle Leahy. When we've talked about this before, it's an easy window to give him a start and only have him throw 2 or 3 innings. He doesn't have to throw a lot, and then bring Palante in. Because if instead of being down 6-0 in the first inning, all of a sudden you get to the third, you've given the Cardinals offense some time to score. If Palante is coming in with the Cardinals having a 2 or 3 run lead, is it a different feel? Or him coming out of the bullpen, is that changing the feel a little bit?
And he has come out of the bullpen before in his career.
What he's doing now isn't working, and we don't seem, to have any plans to try to change it right now from the looks of it.
And I also don't know if you're looking into September, which begins on Monday, September 1st, and saying, okay, what needs to happen in September to give us an idea of what to expect in 2026? When you've had 5 months of history already, what is going to change in September with Andre Palante starting that you don't already know? I mean, how is he going to give you more information about whether you can count on him in 2026 or not? And oh, by the way, don't forget, he's going to be an arbitration eligible player and probably making $4 million a year next year that you don't already know.
$4 million to give up 6 runs in the first inning. I'll do that. Where do I sign up? I mean, if they're giving out jobs, I'm in.
I once told Don Maxwell that I could screw up other hitters for a week because I would throw the ball so slow that nobody would be able to hit it and would mess them up for a week. He didn't buy it.
I was watching the Rangers game the other night, and the Rangers had an incredibly large lead when they won 20 to whatever.
Yeah.
The position player they brought in was throwing a curveball at 38 miles an hour. 38.
Well, at least he's throwing the curveball.
I don't know that it was a curveball. I think it just snapped that hard because it was that soft, but it was quite entertaining.
We want to tell you, of course, that you can get this podcast everywhere you find all of your podcast information, Spotify, YouTube. If you can sign up for our YouTube channel, that would be great. We appreciate all the support and all the comments we get about people who do enjoy the podcast. So hopefully you can find a way to find it whenever it's easy for you. And also don't forget to sign up for our newsletter as well, because it comes out once a week and get all the links to all of our stories if you might have missed them somewhere on the website during the week, our normal game reports, as well as features and columns and things like that. So thanks, of course, to our great sponsorship with the Drury Hotels, great hotel, Drury Hotel in Cincinnati, as well as if you're making that trip, obviously you're there already for the weekend, but make your future plans. 2026 schedule came out this week. That's on the website. Make your plans for some of your summer travel next year. Be sure to check out anywhere in the Cardinals go that might have a Drury Hotel. There's one in Pittsburgh, there's one in Milwaukee, there's one in Cincinnati, of course, the ones in Kansas City, so one outside Chicago. So a lot of places that you would travel to see the Cardinals, you can find a Drury Hotel. So speaking of Cincinnati, I guess the one positive for the Cardinals so far is at the moment, there's not been a resolution for the Wilson Contreras suspension. He did appeal the 6-game suspension. He's waiting on the hearing. I don't think the hearing will be over the Labor Day weekend. So chances are he'll be able to play these 3 games in Cincinnati and then find out the resolution of his appeal.
The interesting thing about Wilson is he's a guy that teammates love to have because he gets fired up and he gets emotional. But he also needs to realize that sometimes you go a little bit overboard. And I think that's kind of what he did there. He would probably admit that he did that there. But as a teammate, he's someone you want on this team.
True. Yeah, no, I think that he definitely is a leader on the club. And I think a very emotional player. I actually think he's been more emotional, maybe not the right word, but at playing first base than catching. I mean, I think he's still very involved in the catching process. You see him anytime there's a conference on the mound, he's over there. He's working with Pages and Pozo and trying to help them out. But I think to move to first, if I had to look back at everything that's happened for the Cardinals in 2025, that's probably worked out better than I expected it.
It has, for sure. There's obviously he's still got a few, fielding issues that he's trying to figure out. The example the other day when the ball came right to him and he didn't know whether to go to second or go to Sonny, and he threw it behind Sonny a little bit. So that's a little frustrating. But all in all, it's worked out a lot better than we thought it would. And the 2 guys that said the whole time they wanted to stay and be a part of this rebuild were Sonny and Wilson. I think they've both done their part and been very vocal about it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Sonny's trying to work through a few things and figure out how to pitch in the heat of St. Louis. But for the most part, he's been pretty good for the year.
And this was an unusually hot and humid summer too. I think it's always hot in St. Louis in August and July and August. We know that. I mean, he knew that when he signed here. But I think the weather, and you don't want to make excuses for anybody. We're not trying to do that. But I do think this summer was particularly a brutal hot summer. So,
and I think as I look forward to next year, I know we've talked about all the options of trade candidates and things like that. And Sonny's not a guy that I would trade personally because you have too many question marks right now in the pitching. And the thing that is most important is innings. Look at the fact that the Milwaukee Brewers just signed Eric Fetty. Why? I have no idea. He blew him the first game he came in. So thank you. But, innings at this time of the year are very important. And Sonny staying healthy helps that.
And the other thing is you think about with potential trades is also don't forget that Sonny Gray's scheduled to earn $35 million next year. If you were, and based on his performance in 2025, I don't know that anybody else would want to pay him $35 million, a place that he would agree to go to, which is also a factor with his no trade clause in his contract. So the Cardinals would probably have to, number one, either pay down that salary or include a prospect or something with him to try to make a deal happen, which they may already have to do with Arenado.
And I think they're going to be okay from a salary standpoint, simply just because they're going to lose $17.5 million on Miles Michaelis' contract going away, which is very helpful.
And they already got Fetty.
And getting rid of Fetty. So that the two of those help because most likely you're replacing those guys with A, Michael McGreevy, and B, Quinn Matthews, most likely. So your salary, changed in the favor of $16.2 million, basically.
A couple other things coming up on Friday to highlight here to make sure you're aware of. One is Victor Scott II is scheduled to be in a rehab assignment with AA Springfield as he comes back from his sprained ankle. So you can see him down in Springfield this weekend if you're down there. And all indications are that if that rehab assignment just a couple of days goes well, he could rejoin the Cardinals on Monday. Of course, Monday also, September 1st, the call-up rules are different now than they used to be for September. You can't call up the whole 40-man roster. It is 28, and you're limited to 14 pitchers. So we actually have one position player and one pitcher. So you have to know who those moves are going to be. But, if Scott comes back, that would fill one of those spots, or he could also send somebody out an option. There is another report out on Friday morning that the Cardinals are going to be promoting Cesar Prieto, who's a infielder at Memphis, a native of Cuba, who has played very well in Memphis both last year and this year. That it's a Spanish Latin America report, and it has not been confirmed by the club. But those things usually are correct. But it didn't say if he was coming up on Friday or maybe potentially as the September 1st call-up. They do have a couple open spots on the 40-man roster, so you would not need to make a 40-man move to add him. You would obviously have to make a move on the 26-man roster or 28-man roster to put him on the active roster. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. I do know that he did not play in Memphis's game on Thursday night in Oklahoma City. So that's usually an indication that some move is afloat as well. If you don't know the background of Cesar Prieto, I wrote about his story in spring training. You can find the story elsewhere on STLSportsPage.com, how he defected from Cuba when he was a young teenager and daring escape, had some help getting out of into a van and off of the bus when the Cuban team came over for the Olympic qualifying tournament. So it's a really interesting story, and it got gutsy move by him to get out of Cuba. So I encourage you to check out that story if you missed it back during spring training. So speaking of September 1st, of course, and assuming you don't know what the roster moves are going to be because you don't know about adding Victor Scott, you don't know for sure. There's no indication yet on how quickly Brendan Donovan is scheduled to return. But if your roster is set and all your regular players are back off the injured list, we also don't know about Arenado either. Who are the one pitcher maybe and one position player that you would like to see the Cardinals add to the roster?
Well, and I think the tough part is Nathan Church has done a really nice job up here. Defensively, he's done a nice job. He can play anywhere you put him in the outfield. So, do they take the easy route and just leave Church up here when they add those other guys because he's already here?
Correct.
So that's option one, I think, right? Option two is the thing that's really frustrating to me on this team is we've got four catchers on the roster and three that are in the game almost every day. One of them trying to play left field. Now, I did hear Ollie the other day say that he's not ruling out Herrera catching ever again. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe that's the case, but you've got a couple really good catchers that are playing well in Memphis, and I would be intrigued to see if they, try something different behind the plate for a little bit, because I like Pages and I like what Pozo's done, but they're not your everyday catcher.
I'm going to get to the catcher in a second, but I want to make one comment on Herrera, as you mentioned that. Remember the great left field experiment when he was supposed to be playing left field a lot? You know how many games he's played in left field so far? 4. You know when the last one was? August 13th. What happened?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I don't know the answer to that. And I think
He was fine out there, I thought.
And I think it's
No
probably
experience.
because of, getting some of these guys back from injured. You've had a little bit more room to DH him
Mhm,
because you don't have Donovan here and you don't have Arenado.
mhm.
And I think once those two come back, then it's going to be kind of a different story of how do you work all these guys in.
And you're still obviously got Newbar. He's been played center some during this month. And you played, you got Walker still. Newbar's also played right. Yeah, I not sure what happened to Herrera playing left field as an option there, but and he also has his kind of power has fallen off too. Once he got 2 home runs,
And I think because you have Church here, you don't feel obligated to play him, so you can play Burleson, Newbar, and Walker in the outfield and be okay. And that's a better defensive option than putting Herrera out there,
right?
Because then it allows you to DH Herrera. So where you are here, everybody's kind of set in their place. Well, the second that Victor comes back, and the second that Donnie comes back, and the second that Arenado comes back,
You got too many bodies.
now what do you do?
Yeah, interesting. But saying all that, the one guy that the catcher that I would love to see them promote in September is Jimmy Crooks. He's the Texas League Player of the Year last year in Springfield. He's had a very good season among the Cardinal organization leaders in both home runs and RBIs. His average is a little bit less in Memphis than it was in Springfield, but all indications are he's going to be a catcher in the big leagues and probably next year. So, one thing is you look potential moves that Squad might make over the winter. Catching is a fascinating position because they have a lot of depth at that position. That the 2 guys at the big league level, not even counting Contreras or Herrera. If you talk about Pages and you talk about Pozo, and then you've got Jimmy Crooks at Memphis. You've got a kid named Leo Bernal, who's a 21-year-old switch hitting catcher in Springfield, playing very well. And then you got a kid named Raniel Rodriguez. We've written about both those guys on the website earlier this year. 18 years old, playing in Palm Beach. Oh yeah, he's hit 20 home runs so far this year between the Complex League and Class A Palm Beach. So you've got 2 potential, starting catchers coming through the pipeline, not counting Jimmy Crooks, not counting the 2 guys that are on the rosters. So to me, one of the mistakes the Cardinals have made in the past, and I'm not saying they're going to do it in the future because we don't know how Chaim Bloom is going to evaluate guys, is, something that George Kissel used to say years and years ago was you got to know your own players better than anybody else. And to me, sometimes the Cardinals have traded a guy that maybe they didn't know enough about before they traded him. Zach Allen comes to mind. Randy Rosarena comes to mind. So I think, let's get Jimmy Crooks up here in September, give him a chance, see what he can do over a month. Then I'm not saying you don't trade him this winter, but you maybe have a little bit better knowledge of what to expect from him if you do and have to include him in a deal to get somebody.
And I think on the flip side, the other downside of the Cardinals and minor leaguers not necessarily knowing them enough is sometimes they overvalue that player.
You got to be accurate.
And so, there are numerous cases where we can think of guys that they were really high on that just didn't work out, right? And I think that's going to be the most fascinating thing to me is what does Chaim see in how he evaluates and how he promotes players, because we've seen it from Mo over the years that he's not quick to move guys up, right? He really wants to take time and move them through the system slowly. And so I'll be curious to see what happens. So does a guy like Jimmy Crooks get a better option? And honestly, of all of the September moves that I would like to see, the one that's not player related is I would like to see the transition of Chaim to Mo happen now. Because if we're really wanting to see what we have for 2026, why is Mo letting Palante still pitch, right? Why is Mo making any of these calls? Let Chaim bring up the guys that he wants to see, and let's figure out if this team can play the way that he likes it or not.
Yeah, because you're going to have to mix. We know this club is going to have to make moves in this winter. I mean, you cannot have a repeat of last winter when the only free agent they signed was Phil Maton, right? At the middle of spring training, didn't make any trades at all. They can't do that again. And I don't think they will because there's too many guys eligible for arbitration that they're not going to want to give those increases to.
And here's the interesting thing that I want to bring up is, you've got Thomas Ajayce, who's playing very well right now.
Mhm.
You've got Nolan Gorman, who you can see that the power's there. He's still struggling to strike out, but he's finally
But the
his
walk
pitch
rate is the
selection's
walk rate
gotten better.
got better.
I heard him say the other day that he's really trying hard to not swing at pitches that he can't do damage with. And it's really helped, right? So you can see the potential there. Well, then you've got Arenado, who's going to be a big log jam there of a problem.
Mhm.
Then you've got Donovan,
Mhm.
and then you've got
When you got JJ coming.
JJ. That's what I'm saying. So, like, at what point do you think JJ is ready to be an everyday player? And who's the odd man out of that group? Obviously, we think that Arenado needs to go first to make room for all of that. But then what?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's what I say. There's going to be some lot of really interesting, fascinating decisions, and it's better to kind of get a read on some of these guys in September, maybe to kind of know what you have. The other guy that I think falls into that category is Quinn Matthews. And again, you're not really rushing him. I know he only had 2 years in the minor leagues because he's a senior sign out of Stanford, and then the Cardinals didn't pitch him his first year as a pro because he'd had such a heavy workload at Stanford. But he's going to be 25 years old here soon. I mean, he's not a kid. You know, I mean, he and I don't, you know, okay, he's had some games in spring training that wasn't as good as some of the other, I mean, not spring training, but in Memphis that have been better. He still has struggled with his control a little bit, but like you said, I don't see any reason why you can't give him some starts, or even if you don't want to start him, bring him up and pitch him kind of like the Pirates did with Bubba Chandler.
Let him do something.
Yeah, just get him in there because he's going to have, because of all the guys that you potential have as the 2026, you know, rotation come adding to the rotation. I think Quinn is at the top of the list because of Roby would have been there, but now the Tommy John surgery has knocked him out. Jerpy's out still with Tommy John surgery. Tink has had a couple of different things, Hens, that he's been dealing with and hasn't even made it to AAA yet. So I think of all the young guys in the system, Quinn's the one.
And the other one that I think is going to be ready quicker than we think too is Liam Doyle.
Well,
now, I realize he was just drafted this year, so he's got to have some time. So probably not opening day, but by the All-Star break next year, it wouldn't surprise me if he's on this team.
I still wait and expecting him to pitch at some point here before the end of the minor league season. So,
and I understand that, you know, he may not be an everyday starter right away to start with, but how important would it be on this team right now to have a left-handed strikeout pitcher?
Yeah. You can find out all the information about the Cardinals minor league system in our new book, All Roads Lead to St. Louis. It's available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get all your books, and some of the feature stories we've written about minor league guys over the years, as well as just a kind of a guidebook to plan a trip to any of the great Cardinal Farm Club, Memphis, Palm Beach. You've got information about spring training and all that kind of stuff. So the Cardinals schedule for 2026 has been released. Open home against Tampa Bay. We're still waiting for the spring training schedule for next year to be released, but it should be coming shortly as well. So not too early to think about. I know we got a month of baseball left, but it's not too early to think about.
I did notice before everyone completely freaks out, we do have a similar situation on the calendar next year, though, in Kansas City, where we play Thursday, Friday, off day Saturday, we play Sunday. Well, as people know, Kauffman shares the same facility and parking lot as Arrowhead, and Arrowhead's hosting a World Cup game on Saturday. So we're not going to be competing with that. So
that makes sense. Well, thanks for the visit. The Cardinals in Cincinnati, a big important series for the Cardinals this weekend. Of course, we'll have all the full coverage here on STLSportsPage.com. Then back home on Monday to take on the Athletics. I can't call them the Sacramento Athletics or the Oakland Athletics or the Las Vegas Athletics. They're just the Athletics.
You did see that they are playing 6 games next year at the Las Vegas Aces Stadium in July.
Yeah.
In Vegas.
Yeah.
Outside.
It's going to be hot.
That's going to be a little warm. Glad we're not playing those, and I'm glad Sonny's not pitching those.
I wouldn't count on that. Thanks for the visit. Enjoy the weekend series. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you again here soon with another edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportsPage.com.